welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a great program lined up for you today. Our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, has a very special guest. We're going to be speaking with Mr. Todd Schulte, president of Forward.us, about DACA, its current status, and the future of the program. So really looking forward to having that conversation. But first, we want to tell you about a few headlines making news across the border, starting with the new reporting from the Washington Post is saying that migrants being held at the $1.2 billion detention center at the Fort Bliss Army Base in Texas were reportedly subject to numerous violations. Now, this report says that it includes medical neglect, poor access to legal counsel for the migrants, and poor plumbing in the facility. Claims that we've heard similar to the so-called alligator Alcatraz in Florida. Now, the Washington Post says these claims are according to detainees as well as federal inspectors. ICE is denying these claims. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary says any claim that there are inhumane conditions at ICE detention centers is categorically false. Moving on to a different facility, an ongoing COVID-19 outbreak at the Otay Mesa facility detention center is the reason why some migrants are missing immigration court dates out in San Diego. That's according to the head of San Diego County's Immigrant Legal Defense Program. The detention facility, which is run by CoreCivic, a private company out of Tennessee, is housing more than 1,400 detainees. They're mostly migrants awaiting deportation or for their court cases to be decided. The outbreak is being blamed on overcrowding. Now, judges, for the most part, are rescheduling appointments, but not everyone is getting a makeup date, leaving some migrants in limbo in danger of losing their cases or even being deported. Also happening, more than a dozen elected officials were arrested on Thursday while protesting conditions at a New York City immigration holding facility, where a federal judge this week extended a court order requiring the government to shape up its treatment of detainees. The officials were among 77 people detained during protests in Manhattan. The government building home to immigration court there is the FBI's New York field office, and it also has other federal offices inside and has become a hotbed of arrests and detention amid President Donald Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. Now, footage posted by State Senator Gustavo Rivera shows demonstrators with their wrists bound being walked away by officers. Rivera was among the elected officials to be arrested by authorities during that protest. Time now to bring in our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera and our special guest for today's episode, Mr. Todd Schulte, president of Forward.us. Hey, thanks for being here, both of you.
You bet, Rudy. Welcome. How are you, Rudy, today?
Good. I'll let you go ahead and take it from here, sir.
Well, okay. Well, Todd Schulte, as you mentioned, Forward.us is what you would call an expert in a lot of immigration issues, including the DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Todd, why don't you start by just kind of fill us in on what this program is about and how it got started with President Obama?
So people may be familiar with the idea or heard the term dreamers before, but dreamers are young undocumented folks that came to this country as children. They either came and they were undocumented right away. They came legally. They overstayed a visa. And in 2012, President Obama put forth a policy called DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program. And the idea is that this was basically a 2-year renewable work permit and relief from deportation. Now, this program has been an astonishing success. Not enough, but an incredible success. It's allowed nearly 1 million DACA recipients over the last 13 years to come forward, the ability to work legally, the ability to live their life free from deportation. And we've all benefited from that. There's a study from the Coalition for the American Dream. It's a leading group of CEOs that says that over the course of the program, about $1 trillion in economic benefit has been there. But more than that, hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens, hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients each and every day today are able to just live their lives with their loved ones with a little bit more certainty. But unfortunately, the program's at risk.
Well, what do you see in terms of a future for DACA, especially with the climate in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we've seen in the last couple of months, really the biggest threats to DACA in many, many years. 8 years ago, this month, actually, President Trump went after DACA. He said he was going to get rid of the program. And the reaction to that, the touching the stove was so hot. If people remember 8 years ago, he started tweeting like, "You love the Dreamers, Congress should act." And there were legal threats against the program. There was a Supreme Court case, but he has subsequently, in kind of acknowledging how wildly popular the program is, not made a full frontal assault on the program. And unfortunately today, whether it's through the courts going after the program potentially, we're concerned about an overall threat, or whether it's efforts to arrest and detain and try to strip away status from DACA recipients, you're seeing DACA recipients under attack. And that's the wrong approach. We should be giving people a pathway to citizenship, not subjecting them to arrest and potentially deportation.
Discuss the renewal process, because as we know, this makes a lot of money for the U.S. government. And you were saying that this is a moneymaker, it's a win-win for everybody involved. So discuss how recipients actually do have to re-enroll in this program every couple of years.
Every 2 years as a DACA recipient, you got to come forward. You got to pay. Really, usually ends up being a little bit over $1,000 at this point between the fees for the program, paying a lawyer. So just think every 2 years you got to go through the paperwork and you got to pay $1,000 just so you can continue to have work authorization. So who are these people? What does that mean? The average DACA recipient came to this country at the age of 6. The average DACA recipient's been in this country for 27 years on average. So, you came to this country when you were 5 years old. You're 35 years old right now. And instead of a pathway to citizenship, you might be raising U.S. citizen kids. Every 2 years, you got to go and you got to hope the government's going to accept your paperwork and you got to pay just so you can work and fully contribute. Sometimes that work permit's going to let you do incredible things. You could be a first responder after a natural disaster. Sometimes it's just going to help you do the things that a lot of people take for granted. Get a little bit better job, save a little bit of extra money, make sure your kids get to a doctor's appointment.
Describe the contributions that DACA recipients are making on a daily basis all across the country and perhaps all across the world with their work.
Yeah. So let's talk about California. I know you're based in San Diego. There's 150,000 DACA recipients in California alone. They live with 285,000 U.S. citizen family members. Those are spouses, might be siblings and kids. DACA lets people work in every sector of the economy. I know DACA recipients who work in medicine, who work in research, manufacturing, who are making sure that when kids go to school, they can be teachers. There's not a sector of the economy that's not made stronger by DACA. And the idea that we would go to people who've grown up in this country, who've lived here for decades, who've been working legally and passing a background check and doing this every couple of years. And instead of saying, let's do everything we can to get you citizenship, that the administration today might be quietly taking efforts to make their lives harder. That's just totally a step in the wrong direction here. That's not going to, free up jobs for people who are born in the United States. It's going to hurt job growth for everybody. It's going to make us poor, and it's going to make us meaner as a country. And I don't think that's what people want. People want to have an affordable life, a good life, and a fair life for themselves and the people around them. DACA shows giving people legal status is good for them. We should give it to all undocumented immigrants who are building their lives here, and it's good for all Americans.
As we were preparing to do this live stream, I reached out to a couple of people, DACA recipients, who've spoken to me on the past, on the record, for stories. One is a doctor in Chicago, one is an aerospace engineer here in San Diego, and both of them politely refuse. They feel like they don't want to be in the spotlight anymore, that they might have a bullseye on their back. What is it like collectively for DACA recipients to sort of have a bullseye on their back and be afraid just to be out and about in a normal way like most of us know?
I can't speak for the average person who's listening or watching this. I bet most of us can't do at-home aerospace engineering or at-home physicianing. The idea that somebody who's accomplished so much is scared to talk about their contributions. We should pause on that for a second. We should think about somebody who can build planes that can fly in the sky and go to space, somebody who can save other people's lives. And that sort of fear that they have for themselves and their loved ones is terrible and it's wrong here. And it's very, very real because you're seeing stories of the government saying, we're going to arrest people. We're going to arrest people because we don't think their legal status actually counts. We're going to arrest people because of what they posted on social media. We're going to arrest people because we say that they just are not the sort of people who we're going to think make this country okay. That's totally wrong. Like, that is a hostile, awful act by the government. Whether they're an aerospace engineer or a doctor or somebody who just is trying to make a little bit more money so they can fly in an airplane or they can go to the doctor. It's wrong no matter what.
We know ICE has arrested and is detaining at least 20 DACA recipients. Do you know anything about their cases and perhaps what their cases are going through the courts and when they might be released, if they will be released?
Yeah, so actually yesterday was really honored to be on a press call with Senator Padilla and a number of people whose loved ones have DACA and have been arrested. And people aren't sure why they've been charged. In some cases, the government has said they no longer basically want to acknowledge the protections of DACA recipients. They've said they're not going to give a reason for why it is here. But we should have an immigration system that isn't just about whether or not people do or don't get deported. We should have an immigration system that says to those DACA recipients, you don't have to live your life in 2-year increments where you're paying to be free of deportation. You don't have to live your life where you hope that will hold up if you come into contact with law enforcement. We should have an immigration system. This is, we're all going to be better off if you can earn a pathway to citizenship. And so I think the answer is we should stop having DACA recipients being arrested. We should stop these awful ICE raids that we're seeing, whether they are from people with masks or not masks. And we should have an immigration system that's fair and just. And it works for all of us. And so that's what we really, really, really think we need.
We're speaking with Mr. Todd Schulte, president of Forward.us, about the current situation with DACA and the future of DACA and its status and the millions of people that are protected by this program. We're going to take a quick break. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Me and our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, joined today by Mr. Todd Schulte, president of Forward.us, to talk DACA today. Sal?
Todd, you mentioned U.S. Senator Padilla from California, and he is introducing some legislation along with Rand Paul, his counterpart from Kentucky, to help provide some sort of a legal pathway to permanent residency and then ultimately citizenship. How realistic is this legislation and perhaps others that have come about and not seen the light of day?
Yeah, so the first kind of what's called the DREAM Act, which would provide, as you said, kind of permanent status and ultimately citizenship for Dreamers, was introduced a little bit over 2 decades ago. And there's been backs and forth. Sometimes it's part of a bigger legislative package. Sometimes it's just a DREAM Act, but it hasn't gotten done. That is a terrible tragedy. Senator Padilla and Senator Paul introduced a bill that would help a type of Dreamers who, in most cases, their parents are here on kind of an employment-based visa. They've grown up in this country here. So, we think we should have a really broad, what's called DREAM Act, that's for people who, came to this country as children who've grown up here. They have a pathway to citizenship. Now, how is that going to happen? Well, it requires, I just want to be really honest. I think would require the president of the United States wanting to get behind that. And so there's 2 political parties in this country. We need to do everything we can to get both parties to prioritize and care more about this issue. There is, I just want to be very blunt, a lot more support right now in the Democratic Party. That's not a partisan statement. There's so many more things the Democratic Party could be doing on this issue. But when it comes to immigration policy right now, I think the president has a hand on the wheel of the Republican Party. And so I think the most important thing that as people can do is, as people are seeing these stories about DACA recipients, as they are talking to people who have DACA and who know people there, to get active. If they want to go look for resources on how to help people, they can go to our website, www.forward.us, or they can go to other places.
Okay.
And
Todd,
sorry, my little kids decided to come in here, so
it's
I
okay.
apologize for a second. So yeah,
They're welcome anytime.
yeah,
And I bet you they're very proud of their fathers. So I did want to ask you, you mentioned Democrats, and without throwing anyone under the bus,
yeah.
we were led by a Democrat, President Biden. Why do you think nothing got done when he was in office?
I think life and politics is about priorities, right? Like we all have the best intentions at times, but look, um, President Obama came into office as a Democrat in 2009 and 10. He prioritized healthcare reform. Maybe you think that was a right call or not. He got healthcare reform done. Immigration was a second term priority for him. It was a second term priority for President Bush as well. President Biden only got one term, and he came into office, and they did not prioritize a legislative solution for undocumented immigrants or for dreamers. They introduced a bill, but it was not a core central part of their package, if we're being honest about it. You got to spend political capital. You got to work on these things, and it didn't get done. They also waited, I would say, too long on a lot of immigration policies, whether it was an approach to the border, whether it was some executive actions that they ended up taking in June in 2024, really good executive actions that we supported. And so I think it's a question of prioritization. And so I think as we are trying to help people and fight through this moment, if we get to a better moment, making sure we have the political and the policy momentum to prioritize legal status for people who are building their lives here, including DACA recipients, is really, really important. And I would encourage us all to think about that when we see these individual injustices today, how are we building to have a better system in the future?
Talk about, you were mentioning the program is not accepting anyone right now. You foresee the doors
Yeah.
opening and perhaps another wave of DACA recipients that are being allowed to be part of this?
Yeah, let me explain why, unfortunately, that we don't think it's going to be the case. So DACA was really put under legal threat about 8.5 years ago. There was an effort to effectively unfreeze the program to people who had DACA already, but it then has been frozen to new DACA applicants for really most of the last 8 years. We don't think that's particularly likely to change. It is possible. And so that's why we think protecting people who have the program today and really building the support to make sure no one goes after that, as well as building support in Congress is critical. We'd like the program to be unfrozen and new applicants should be accepted in it. But for a variety of reasons, I think that's pretty tragically unlikely at this point.
Let's say DACA goes away. What happens to the million or so recipients? Do they just fade into the shadows and trying to hide from ICE? Or what do you foresee taking place if DACA is finally put into the closet forever?
Yeah, I think no, people aren't going to go back into the shadows. Like I'm not going to say some people won't and they won't be scared and they won't hide here. You were talking about millions of people who have DACA, who live with someone who has DACA, who are every single day close to someone who has that. This can't happen in the shadows. The most important thing I can say to people watching and listening is this will be a public fight if the president goes after it. I need to be really clear. That's why we think it's so important to educate people about this. It's so important.
When you say illegal fight, like a class action or state by state, how do you foresee that happening if it does have to go into the courts?
So there's an active lawsuit right now in Texas, and so it's been an ongoing lawsuit. I won't bore everybody with it, but we anticipate in the next couple of weeks there could be efforts by certain state attorneys general, often led out of Texas, potentially the Department of Justice, so that's like the federal government, trying to work to basically reduce DACA, bring DACA to an end in some sort, in some capacity there. We don't know what's going to happen yet, but we want people to be vigilant about that.
Okay. What do you say to people who might know a DACA recipient? How do we help? How do we aid in their lives here, making them feel wanted, making them
Yeah.
feel like they're needed?
Let me give people three things. So the first thing is if you work with somebody or you want to make sure that your employer is doing everything you can, I would encourage people to check out our website. You can say, or how to be a good DACA employer, if you throw it into Google, and fwd.us. But there are things that employers can do to be a better employer. Make sure that people have legal support. They have a legal screening. There may be another visa available to them. That's something that we can all do as members of a community. Here is just make sure people, are getting all the legal support they can. So that's number one. Number two, as you are thinking about who to vote for, what to ask your politicians for, if you can't vote, who are you encouraging other people to vote for? Put this at the top of the list. Say that this is something that's really important to you. The third thing is just ask people, what can they do? And understand that people are scared and they're right to be scared. Now, I think that hope is a strategy, and I think it is best accomplished by having tangible steps where you put one foot in front of another. But just asking people how you can show up for them too sometimes is really important in these hard moments.
All right. Well, thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, Mr. Schulte. So hopefully we can call on you another time to continue this discussion. It was incredibly insightful. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, sir. Sal, if you could stick around, though, because I do have one story I want to ask you about when we come back from the break. Border Report Live will be back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera joining me here on the program today. First of all, Sal, incredible guest today. What an incredible conversation. We appreciate you doing that for us, but we have some more to ask of you. You have some new reporting on a mayor that's actually being linked to a cartel organization south of the border. Fill us in on that information.
Well, the Treasury Department came out yesterday, a few days ago, and pointed a finger at former mayor of the city of Rosarito. Her name is Araceli Brown Figueredo. She was the mayor of Rosarito from 2019 till 2024. Now, Rosarito, it's a small town, about 35,000 residents, about 20 miles south of the border. It's famous for its big beach festival with concerts with artists from both sides of the border. A little bit south of that is the town of Puerto Nuevo, Newport, which is sort of the birthplace of Baja-style lobster. Perhaps it's close to lunchtime, and that's why I'm thinking about it. But the area is very well known and has become a hub of criminal activity for Los Mayos, which is another group that has been designated as a terrorist organization, and it has links to the Sinaloa cartel. Now, the Mayor Brown Figueredo is being accused of being well connected to two brothers who were running a cell for Los Mayos in Rosarito. Okay, she's also connected to a third man. She's accused of having a very close relationship with this man. And through her, he was appointing people to various posts within the municipal government. He was also using the police department to protect his illegal activities. They were using several restaurants and bars in Rosarito to launder money for the Sinaloa cartel. That's what they're being accused of. Now, she has said she is not guilty of any of these accusations. The their Mexican counterparts for the Department of Treasury here in the U.S., the Department of Treasury Ministry of Mexico, they froze all of her bank accounts. But she says that this is not the case, that her accounts are still very much active, and that she's still able to travel to the U.S., citing a recent trip to San Diego. So she's saying, I am not involved in any way, shape, or form. But of course, the U.S. Treasury Department feels otherwise, and they are pointing a finger at her, saying that she was very much involved with Los Mayos, who were involved with the Sinaloa cartel, who were laundering a ton of money for both countries.
You know, to call back on Mr. Elon Katz, a criminal defense attorney who myself, you, and Julian Resendez, our El Paso correspondent, spoke with earlier this week. You know, something he mentioned, kind of to piggyback on what you just said about that allegation of another individual appointing people to local posts. Something that really rung out from that conversation with Mr. Katz was that it is so hard for anyone but the federal government in Mexico to fight corruption, because oftentimes it's these local officials that are kind of doing these wrongs and making it harder for them to actually fight the fight on all kinds of trafficking.
And it's extremely difficult because you see this everywhere in Mexico, not just in northern Baja. So he is right. It's like, how do you fight corruption? How do you get local governments, police officers who don't make a lot of money, how do you keep them from the temptation of making so much cash that is out there for if they do help these drug cartels or organized crime. So it's very difficult for municipal governments to do what they can or stand up to cartels because they're very small in a way. And sometimes it's just better to go along to get along.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much, Salvador. We appreciate your reporting today. Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent. Thank you again to our guest today, Mr. Todd Schulte. That is going to do it for us. Don't forget to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a great show. If you love politics and you love data, you can find out more at abc27.com or your local Nexstar station's website for that. That does it for us today. Have a great weekend.